Hey folks, I'm the Fitness Vlogger here, and today we're going to talk about mass incarceration. Now, I know, not a happy topic, but let's get into it, because this is important. Compared to the UK, for every 100,000 people, we put 716 people in prison, whereas in the UK they put in, for example, 147. Now that is that is at least 5 times the rate that they do. And in the last 40 years, 1970 to at least 2010, in the latest study that I found, we increased our incarceration by 2 million, from 500,000 to 2,500,000 inmates, prison inmates, whether it means parole or federal or state jails. That is horrifying. That is horrifying. Absolutely horrifying. And we only do it more because we are funding prisons. We are making money off of prisons. Now let's look at the numbers of people in there, specifically the men. 1 in 9 men are likely to be in prison, but compare that to the number of white men. 1 in 17 white men are going to be imprisoned compared to 1/3 of black men. And that's just causing a whole race issue that we can discuss later. And then when you compare it to the Latino men, 1/6 of all Latino men go to prison. And that's just men. And there's a ratio with women with disparities equal with the different races, and it's just as bad. Now, just over 45% of prison mates are in for drugs, and that's from 1970, when we started the war on drugs, when Nixon started the war on drugs. And it's only caused more incarceration. Creating a system where you make money off of sending people to jail and bailing out people who are doing far worse things. Because just over 50% of prison mates are in for weapons, which is something that is far more dangerous. Because they are, whether you got them legally or not, or explosives or whatever, that is 30% less than people who are in there for drugs and who are getting life sentences or ruining their lives forever for, say, a pound of marijuana. Which is why we really need to kind of worry about making drugs not illegal, but just regulated, just to make it easier. And if you look at the rest of the stats, 10% is for immigration, and if you are in illegally. Now, and 6% is for sexual offenses like rape, sexual assault, all of that shit. And I imagine that it includes domestic abuse in that as well. So, that all being said, compare the reasons that people are getting arrested, that people are getting thrown in jail and not given bail. And even when you include parole, that is still a hell of a hard time to live, because once you get out of jail, it doesn't matter how small the offense was. As you've seen, 45% of prison mates are in for drugs. So, obviously, jail sentences are going to fuck up your life for the rest of your life, whether it means getting a job or trying to adopt or any of that. It's going to affect it so much, and going to jail for drugs is such a small offense compared to, say, weapons. However, there are solutions to this. It's going to take time, but there are solutions. And I know that a measly person on the internet, is not going to do much, but you can bring this to your local authorities, the people above you, writing letters, and all of that stuff. And doing all that is going to help make these solutions a thing, so mass incarceration isn't such a big problem. Alright, so let's stop making new prisons and help rehabilitate the people already in the prison, especially when they go on parole, and let's create other alternatives. And that being said, treating addiction as a health problem, mental health as a health problem, and getting them help, getting them the help they needed instead of criminalizing it. A lot of people, there's a reason that some of the defense is someone wasn't really in the right mind to make the decision. There's a reason that's a defense, because that is a real issue. Mental illness is not treated very well in the criminal system, because oftentimes people with mental illness are sent to prisons instead of mental health facilities. proper mental health facilities to get themselves taken care of, to get themselves help. And that is a problem that is a big part of this problem. So, if we treat addiction and mental health as not criminalizing it, but making it a health problem, a mental health problem, and getting them help, that would ease up a lot of the incoming flow into the prisons. Now, pretrial alternatives are also important. If you can find other places, other better ways to treat people before their trial, instead of just tossing them into jail with people who are already hardened criminals, putting them in danger, especially if they're innocent. If they're innocent, you are putting them in danger in a hostile area of people who are hardened and criminal and who haven't been treated very well by the criminal justice system. And just for innocent people, that's unfair, and for guilty people, I'm sure that's just giving them a taste, even if they're not going to be actually imprisoned, which is a whole other issue. Now, as I said before, let's legalize drugs. Legalizing the safe drugs like marijuana. Marijuana has some medical research behind it that oftentimes people aren't acknowledging. It is helping people with seizures and mental and stuff like that, but it's not seen as a safe drug yet, and for that reason people are going to jail for pot and marijuana and, you know, all that stuff. If it's not, and it shouldn't be criminalized. It should just be seen as a problem if you are addicted, and if it's not an addiction, then I'm sure it's not a problem, and you shouldn't be sending someone to jail for the rest of their life, ruining the rest of their life because they had 1 ounce or 1 pound of weed. It's not as big a deal as people try to make it. And the last thing I'm going to say is acknowledge the institutional racism. I barely touched on this, but as I said before, 1 out of 17 white men are likely to go to prison, while 1 out of 3 black men are, or 1 out of 6 Latino men are. And that is an absolute problem. And the root of it is racism, and we need to address the racism. And I didn't want to address Black Lives Matter, which is a whole other issue that's part of this, that kind of feeds into everything. So, I'm going to leave it off at that. We have major mass incarceration issues, but there are ways we can fix it, so I'm going to leave it off here. I hope you had a good day. Don't forget to join Folklore, and I will see you guys in the next video.